but then this is a message that's for you today. You might be struggling yourself. You might have friends that are struggling. They may even be sat next to you right now. And you might think, well, I've been praying and praying and praying, but it feels like God's not answering what's going on. And that might be where you are right now. You might have finally started to make a breakthrough in life. Something might have been happening, then all of a sudden the setback comes again. Finally, something has started to go your way, and then all of a sudden something comes back and knocks you off course again. Maybe you can relate to that. Maybe it's a big problem, or maybe it's not a big problem, just an ongoing problem where life's okay, but it's not great. Maybe your job is not great. Maybe your finances are not great. Maybe your relationships with people are not great. Maybe you're even sitting by someone who's not great right now. I don't know if you've ever heard things like this said before. Life is a bit like this. It's a bit like you're either going into a trial, you're in the middle of a trial, or you're coming out of a trial. And you're in one of those three seasons nearly your whole life. That's a bit what life is like, isn't it? In fact, Peter in the New Testament called these difficulties in life fiery trials. He said this in 1 Peter, he said, these trials will show that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold, though your faith is far more precious than mere gold. You see, if you feel depressed, if you feel discouraged today, if you feel like your faith is being tested and you're on a trial right now, it's okay, because that fire tests us and purifies us. And today what we're going to do is we're going to continue our series in the book of Daniel. If you've been here for the past few weeks, we've been going through a book in the Old Testament called Daniel. If you haven't been, don't worry. It's okay. You can catch up online if you want to, or you can just listen to today. And in this book of Daniel, we've learned a bit about Daniel and his friends. And some of his friends, which I'm sure you all remember the names of, are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They've been taken away, and they've been facing a test in today's story we're going to look at. In fact, you might even think it's a test of a lifetime they're about to face. They're facing a fiery furnace. It's a story where if you've probably grown up around churches or anything like that, you'll be familiar with this story about where these guys get thrown in a fiery furnace. But what we're going to discover today, and this is relevant for all of us, is a faith that's been tested is a faith that can be trusted. If your faith has never been tested, if since you've been a follower of Jesus, it's all been plain sailing, I tell you what, you might get knocked off course at some point. But if your faith has been tested, then it's a faith that can be trusted because it will stand the trials of life. And, when you think about today's passage that we're going to get to, you might even be sat there thinking now, well, I'm in a fiery trial, or I know someone in a fiery trial. I might be sat next to someone who's in a fiery trial in their life right now. And so this is a message which I feel is relevant to a lot of us. But let's review where we've got to so far in this book of Daniel. As we've been going through this book of Daniel, we had this evil king, Nebuchadnezzar. And at this point, this man was one of the most powerful men, if not the most powerful man in the world. He was the king of the Babylonian Empire. And if you know any of your history, the Babylonian Empire was huge. And what he'd done over time, he'd conquered many, many lands. And he conquered Judah. And when he conquered Judah, he ordered the capture of the best and the brightest young people in the land. We talked about this a few weeks ago, and Daniel and his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who were likely teens at the time, got deported from their homeland all the way to Babylon. Different culture, different place, living somewhere different. And so that's some of the backstory. But in today's story we're reading about this king who clearly loves himself because he builds a giant statue of himself. And when I say giant statue, it's 90 feet tall, 9 feet wide, which is, to put it in context, the height of an 8-story building. We're talking a big statue here. We're not talking something small that you might see outside a sports ground or something like that. We're talking about something you will see from a distance. you see. And we find out that as he's built this statue of himself, he invites every government leader, he tells them to come, every government leader, advisor, judge, magistrate, everyone in the land, I want you to come to the dedication of what's going to happen. And that's where we're going to pick up some of what the story is in Daniel 3. I'm going to read a few verses throughout that as we go through. Look at verses 4 to 6 first of all, where it says this: Then a herald shouted out, "When you hear the sound of the musical instruments, bow to the ground to worship King Nebuchadnezzar's gold statue. Anyone who refuses to obey will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." Now, it doesn't get any more serious than this. You're not going to find anything in life more serious than this. That when you hear the worship music start playing, when you hear the instruments start playing, when Nick breaks into that guitar solo, you will bow down. You will bow down straight away. And that's not because of the guitar solo, that's because of the statue of me that's on the stage, okay? You will bow down in worship. You will worship the King. And if you don't, I'm going to fry you in a fiery furnace. You're going to die. And this is a massive trial, a massive test for these people that have been faced with this. And sometimes when we read stories from the Old Testament and things like that, particularly if you've read them a number of times, you sometimes lose the seriousness of what's going on here. We miss what's going on here. If you don't obey and bow down, you're going to die. But we need to remember that a faith that's been tested is a faith that can be trusted. See, the king says, you need to bow and worship this statue or you're going to die. And what do you think the crowd did at that point? They bowed down. They bowed down. Verse 7, it says, "So at the sound of the musical instruments, all the people, whatever their race or nation or language, bowed to the ground and worshipped the gold statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up." That's what the crowd did. They'd been threatened. Don't do this, you're going to die. So they bowed down. Just imagine that. All these people have gathered. This huge gathering. And they're all bowing. And then probably as King Nebuchadnezzar, his advisors, are looking around, they see there are 3 people still standing. They haven't bowed. They're still standing upright. The leaders are probably looking at it going, no way. What's going on? They're still standing. They've not bowed down. What are we going to do? We need to tell the king. You imagine they'd have run off and probably told the king, hey Nebi, you know those lads you think were great? They're not bowing down to your statue. You got your first lot for burning. The king, you can imagine, was furious. Probably screamed at the boys, basically, you need to bow down or I'm going to have to burn you. Bow or burn. That's their option. And in verse 16, we see a response. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, very politely at this point, by the way. They're not shouting at him, getting angry with him, like we see a lot of people seem to do today. They shout at people they disagree with. King Nebuchadnezzar, very polite. We do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. And watch their faith at this point. They're not worried. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. And the thing I want you to notice here, they say, the God we serve is able to deliver us. God is able. And I want that to sink in for just a moment. Do you know that God is able? Their lives are literally on the line here. They're refusing to compromise their faith, even in the face of death, because they know the God they serve is able. You know, and just think about that. How easy would it have been to rationalize doing the safe and easy thing? What would you do in that moment? Would you fake it? Would you bow? Would you bow with your fingers crossed behind your back? I'm bowing, but you can't see. Well, my fingers are crossed. What would you do? Would you do that? Would you worship just this once, thinking, okay, my God's a forgiving God. He'll forgive me, no problem. He'll forgive me for what I'm doing, and so God will understand. Would you be thinking, well, besides, if we die, how are we going to help these people that God has clearly brought us here to help? How are we going to do that? What are we going to do? But they refuse to compromise their faith. And let's be real, this is probably really hard for us to imagine. Facing possible death for your faith in Jesus. How many of you en route here this morning faced people with guns, maybe roadblocks, any kind of trial like that? Maybe didn't sleep last night because there was a war going on around your home. Any of you face anything like that on the way this morning? Probably none of you. Hopefully none of you. Otherwise, it's a lot worse this area than I realized. And sometimes it's easy to write off stories like this because it's like it just seems so irrelevant to the world we live in here in the UK. It doesn't apply to me. But it does, because your faith is tested every single day in many, many ways. Every day you have the choice to do what is right or what is easy. Every day of your life. Do what's right in following God or do what's easy. You have the choice to do what pleases God or to do what pleases people. You have the choice to worship God or to give your heart to a worldly idol. We see it nowadays. I've seen it within churches. I've seen some churches compromise their whole belief system around certain ideologies in the world today. I see individuals have walked away from faith because they're more concerned about pleasing the people around them than God himself. It's a tricky world we live in. And so actually your faith is tested in many ways every single day. Do you keep your eyes pure? Do you watch inappropriate things on TV again and again and again? Do you hold your tongue or do you join in the gossip? And by the way, the worst place for joining in the gossip is online. Do you tell the truth? Do you exaggerate? What do you do? But I'd never worship an idol. I'm not going to bow down to an 8-story statue. No, you might not bow down to an 8-story statue, but you're probably bowing down to an 18-centimeter thing that's in your pocket right now. How many of you are itching to get your phone out and look at the moment? See, what is worship? Worship is where you give your time, your heart, your attention. And I'm guilty of this as well, Sarah. I spend loads of time on my phone. Every day, over 3 hours, my phone likes to remind me. 9 o'clock every day, it reminds me of how many hours I've spent on it today. Some of you will go, yeah, I need it for my job. Yeah, we do. Sometimes need it for jobs, but how much extra time do we spend on it? Guilty. But what do you worship? Is it your phone? Is it your job? Is it your bank account? Is it people's approval? Is it your kids? Some, even your pets. What is it you worship? Because we all worship something. We're all tempted in some way. But I promise you, in life, if you're committed to serving God, the devil will tempt you to compromise your faith in God. The more you start serving God, the more the distractions will come and try and get in the way and throw you off. But let's go back to Daniel a second, because I love the faith of these young lads. Like I said, they said, if we're thrown into this blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. Can you imagine that faith? No matter what problem I face in life, no matter what I'm going through, my God is able. What an attitude. If you get a bad medical report, if you go to the doctor and they tell you some bad news, well, my God, he is able to heal. If you've got a broken relationship or one that's struggling, you know what? My God, your God is able to restore. If you're struggling financially, my God, your God, he is able to provide. My God is able. In fact, I want to get this across to you. So after 3, can you say, my God is able? 1, 2, 3. Okay, you're starting to go in now a little bit. My God is able. Your God is able. The God is able. Okay? We sometimes say these things but don't live these things. And the question is, what if our God is able and he doesn't? And that's the place where people often get stuck. I've seen it recently. There was a celebrity, I can't remember which one it was. He said, I prayed and God didn't show up. So he walked away from faith. Well, what if God did show up, but not in the way you wanted him to show up, because you thought he was like a genie that when you pray and ask what you want, he gives you exactly what you want when you want it? What if that's the God you were expecting, not the God who we read about in the Bible? So, what happens? What if we know God can? What if we believe he will and he doesn't? And we see that with these boys here as they're about to face the furnace. Let me pick up from the end of verse 17, where it says, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. Still very polite. Beginning of verse 18. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up. But even if he doesn't, these boys were facing the biggest moment of their lives. They knew their God is able to deliver them from this trial. But even if he doesn't, we are not going to compromise our belief. You see, when you're facing a fiery trial, and when you're asking God to deliver you, maybe one of the greatest statements you can ever make is this: God, I believe you can. God, I believe you will. But even if you don't, I still believe. That's probably one of the greatest things you could ever say when you're facing a trial. In fact, it's so great, I'm going to go a bit of almost more liturgical Anglican on us right now, and we're going to do something where you copy me. We're going to say it back, okay? So I'm going to say it, and then you just copy what I say. God, I believe you can.
God, I believe you can.
God, I believe you will.
God, I believe you will.
But even if you don't, I still believe.
I still believe.
Okay, how was that? A bit uncomfortable for you? A little bit weird, wasn't it? But those words, that understanding of who God is, can help you when you are facing a difficult time. God is not a genie that gives you what you want when you want it. There are moments where he may not show up as you want him to, but you can still believe in him, even in that moment. And so what happens in our story? Well, what happens is the king orders at this point the furnace, if it wasn't bad enough, to be heated 7 times hotter. Let's make it roasting. Let's make it so hot in there that no one has a chance of surviving. Then he orders the strongest soldiers, bring out the big lads, bring them in, to come and tie up these 3 boys. And then he gets the soldiers to throw in the 3 boys. And it's so hot that as they throw these 3 boys in, the soldiers actually get burnt up. That's how hot it is. Okay, the flames kill the soldiers. And King Nebuchadnezzar looks on. He's there watching. And he's shocked with what he sees. And he's probably looking, going, guys, how many did we throw in the fire? Guys, was it 3? Yeah. And look at the response in verse 25. Look, he answered, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they're not hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. And this is where the story gets crazy. As if it wasn't crazy enough already, 3 men are thrown into the fire, but a 4th one appears. A 4th one is now in there with them. And who was this 4th man? Well, scholars will tell you as you look at this, the 4th man was like a Christophany, like an appearance of Jesus. It was basically, the Christophany means Christ, Jesus, and an ophany means an appearance. And so this is an Old Testament appearance of Jesus. So in the story of the Bible, Jesus hasn't been born in human form yet. That hasn't happened. But let's not forget he was there in the beginning. He was the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit were all there at creation together. But this here seems to be another one of those moments where we get an appearance of Christ in the Bible. This is like a pre-incarnate, a pre-born version or visitation of Jesus, is what is happening in this moment. In this moment, there's not 3, there's 4 that are seen in the fire. And this is where the story goes, say, to a whole other level of what is going before. And that whole other level is that Jesus meets them in the fire. He meets them there. And just hold that thought for a minute. He's there with them in the biggest trial they have ever faced, right in the middle with them. And if you go right to the end of this story, you see the boys miraculously survive. No harm, no bodies, don't even smell like smoke. You know, if you've been sat near a fire pit at any point or anything like that, you stink the next day. Okay? They come out fresh as you like. Somehow, they've gone through this fiery trial. And the next thing you know is that King Nebuchadnezzar, who resented, who ordered them to happen, puts his faith in God by them standing up. It says this in verse 28. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God." You hear that? Praise be to the God. He's worshipping their God. In Babylon, where he is the king, he is worshipping their God because of the trial they have just been through. And this is where we need to notice exactly what God does and exactly what God doesn't do. Notice this. When did God deliver the boys? Was it before the trial? Before the fire? Or was it in the fire? God didn't deliver them from the fire, did he? They still went through this trial. He delivers them in the fire. That is where he met them. He met them in the very place where the king thought they were going to be killed. And I want you to realize, you need to understand and embrace the truth that God doesn't always deliver us from our trials, but he's always with us in our trials. How often do we pray, God, I don't want to go through this? Not necessarily wrong, but then we don't always pray, God, be with me through this. We just want him to deliver us from any pain or sadness or difficulty or trial, but sometimes he's saying, no, you've got to go through that, but I'm going to be with you. I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to come with you all the way. And maybe you're in a difficult season right now. Maybe you're in the middle of the worst trial you ever think you've been through in your life. Well, just like these boys, Jesus can meet you in the fire. He can meet you in your trial, in whatever you're going through. See, sometimes stories can have a miraculous resolution, like this one. Sometimes they don't. But the point is not whether it gets resolved the way you want it or not. The point is the fact that Jesus will be with you in the fire. That is the point of what is happening here. And what I want you to see today is that when you put your faith in God, when you put your trust in him, Jesus will always meet you in the fire, no matter what you are going through. You know, could you just think about these boys? I wonder what Jesus said to them as they're in this fire, this fire that's so hot, it burned up people who were just near it. When they're surrounded by flames, they're not consumed. You know, just wonder what Jesus said. Would it be something along the lines of, our Heavenly Father, God is so proud of you, that you stood strong, that you trusted him, That because of your faith, the king will come to know God. You just wonder what he said. Did he say anything? They didn't know that because of their faith, their names will be remembered throughout history. They didn't know that at this point, as their story was going to be told all over the world, that people who face trials and persecution, and even death in some places for strength, would be strengthened by hearing this story. These were just 3 young lads who stood up for what they believed in. You see, the fiery furnace looked like the place where their lives were going to end. But it turned out to be the place where they met Jesus. In the hardest moment of their life was the very point they met Jesus. And you and I can hold on to that same hope today. No matter what you're going through, and we're all going through different things, all of us in life, Jesus will meet you in the fire. Jesus will tell you he loves you. He'll tell you he's proud of you. He'll never leave you. He said, I want to meet you where you're at. And that's what I want to do today. I want us to pray for each other. Because I think there's probably a number of people here who are thinking, I feel like I'm in the middle of a trial. I'm in the middle of just life feels terrible to me right now. You might think it's not even the worst trial in your life. You might think it's small compared to some others. But if you're in a trial, I want to pray for you that you will meet Jesus in the trial. So I'm going to ask us to do something brave in a second. I'm going to ask us, okay, I'm going to explain it all before we get going. And you don't have to take part, by the way. In a minute, I'm going to ask, if you're going through a trial of any kind, it might feel like a big fiery trial to you. It might feel like a small flame trial to you. But if you're going through anything, and that could be physical, emotional, mental, you name it, anything like that, in a moment, I'd love you to put your hand up. Okay? And the reason I'm doing that is not so that everyone looks around and go, well, look at them, they're suffering. It's because the people who don't put their hands up, I'm going to ask them if they feel comfortable enough to gather around someone with a hand up to go and pray for them. You don't have to take part. Please feel free. You don't have to. But this is the moment where I think we need to be praying for each other and going, actually, pray Jesus meets them where they are at right now. This is what the local church should do for each other. They should look to pray for each other and lift each other up and encourage each other with no matter what they are going through. But I'm not forcing you to take part, okay? And also, if you're one of the people that puts the hand up, okay, in a moment, you do not need to tell the people necessarily all what's going on if you don't want to. It's up to you what you say. You might want to put your hand up and ask people just to pray for you. That's okay. I'm okay with that. Okay, there's no right, there's no wrong, but this is a moment where I want to pray and we remember the very thing we repeated earlier. So, repeat after me. God, I believe you can. God, I believe you will. But even if you don't, I still believe. Okay? So, if you want prayer for any kind of trial, can I ask you to be very brave and raise a hand? Because all of you said at the beginning, no one put a hand up when I said life was perfect, which means in theory, all of you should have your hand up at this point, because see how I tricked you there? Good, hey? It's like I thought this through, okay? So who's facing any kind of difficulty? Could be physical, could be emotional, could be mental, anything at all. Perfect, we've got some over there. Anyone else? It always takes one person to put a hand up. Another one down here. Anyone else? Another one in there. Anyone else? Okay. Anyone? Oh, at the back. Perfect. Right. Perfect. Right, so can we see these people? 1, 2, 3, 4. Anyone else? Last chance? Alex. Perfect. I'll get around you as well. Now, those of you who don't have hands up and feel comfortable, go and pray. This is where you get up and go around these people and pray that they will meet Jesus in the fire of their trial. They may tell you what the trial is, they may not. So we've got one down the front, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's go.